The Erevos Gate was never meant to be beautiful, but I couldn't help staring at it as we drifted in orbit around the unnamed exoplanet below. Sleek obsidian plating wrapped around a frame of polished titanium ribs. Its sharp, angular profile more like a weapon than a vessel. Most ships in the United Earth-Space Research Fleet were white or silver, made to reflect radiation. The Erevos Gate drank in the light, a shadow gliding through the void. She was our first intergalactic jump-capable craft, built to fold quantum space into ribbons and stitch them together again on the other side. We'd trained for years, studied every scrap of data on the drive's prototype, and still, when the moment came, standing on that bridge, my palms were slick inside my gloves. Our crew was small, 7 people who had been hand-picked not just for skill, but for temperament. We'd be months, maybe years, away from home. Dr. Kira Halden, xenobiologist, quiet but relentless once she latched onto a question. Dr. Marikose, geologist, lover of bad coffee and worse jokes. Lieutenant Varen Cho, navigator and my second-in-command. Methodical to a fault. Chief Engineer Nadir Solano, who treated every machine like a living thing. Pilot Jonah Ree, cocky, smooth, but sharp when it counted. Communications Officer Amina Serrano, who could hear a whisper in a hurricane. And me, Commander Elias Vance, a man who'd always wanted to see what was on the other side of the dark. We jumped at 0417 hours. The drive's activation was nothing like the simulations. No clean white tunnel, no neat distortion effect. The viewport fractured, like looking through shattered glass that somehow still held together, and the stars folded inward until there was only a single point of red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then space inverted. One instant, the familiar constellations were gone. The next, we were hanging above a planet I'd never seen before. It was roughly Earth-size, wrapped in streaks of crimson and gold cloud. Land masses glowed faintly, as if lit from beneath. Oceans reflected the light, like sheets of dark metal rather than water. And there was no star in sight, at least not the way we understood it. Instead, a diffuse red glow filled the entire sky, with a single, perfectly round moon hovering motionless above the planet's northern hemisphere. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. We made orbital passes for the better part of 8 hours before choosing a landing site, a flat plateau near the edge of what scans suggested was a sprawling city ruin. There were no life signs, at least none our sensors could identify. Atmospheric readings were just within breathable range for humans, though oxygen content was slightly lower. All right, I told the crew over comms as Erevos Gate's landing struts touched down with a faint tremor. Welcome to the edge of known space. The first day was consumed by setup. The temporary field research base was little more than a modular array of domes and scaffold walls, but with the right insulation and environmental control, it would keep us alive. Cho oversaw the atmospheric filters. Solano anchored the power array into the plateau bedrock. Ose deployed a string of seismic probes into the nearby canyon. Halden insisted on collecting soil and air samples before we so much as took our helmets off. I helped wherever I was needed, mostly moving crates and double-checking the perimeter seals. But my attention kept drifting to sky. It never changed. No clouds moved. The faint crimson haze stayed locked in place. And that moon, if you could call it that, remained exactly where it was, not shifting even a fraction over the course of hours. By the second day, we'd officially named the planet Xytherra. It was Cho who suggested it, a hybrid of an old Terran word for stranger and a fragment of a pre-expansion star chart designation. The name stuck, partly because it sounded like something out of myth, and partly because there was no denying that this place felt staged. We began our first survey on day 2, fanning out from the base in a half-kilometer radius. The terrain was smooth, almost unnaturally so, the ground covered in dark stone that didn't seem to fracture or erode. In the far distance, the city ruins stood like teeth, black spires rising from the earth, their surfaces catching the red light like polished metal. Halden was the first to point it out. "Sir, there's no night here." At first, I thought she meant it figuratively, but after checking the chronometer and reviewing the environmental logs, I saw what she meant. We'd been planetside for over 30 hours. The light hadn't shifted once. No sunset, no shadows lengthening, no sign of a planetary rotation. More puzzling still, our orbital scans before landing had shown Xytherra spinning, a normal rotation speed for a planet of its mass. But here on the surface, time stood still in the sky. We turned our scopes to the moon. High-resolution optics revealed its surface was unlike any natural satellite. Perfect geometric etchings crawled across it and kept changing, not cycling or looping, but shifting into new configurations every time you looked. It was Osei who voiced what we were all thinking. That's not a moon. That's a machine. We logged the anomaly, ran the data through every spectral analysis filter we had, and still came up empty. No power signatures, no transmissions, no debris field. Just that cold, unblinking shape. By the end of day 3, we were already realizing that Xytherra wasn't going to give up its secrets easily. The place was like a riddle carved into the bones of a planet. And I had the feeling we'd only just found the first piece. We left the base at 0600 hours, with the crimson light of Xytherra's sky glinting off our helmets. It was hard to tell if it was morning or evening here. Every minute felt suspended in the same perpetual dusk. I still hadn't gotten used to the way the horizon looked. Flat, wide, and strangely perfect, as if someone had drawn it with a ruler. We were headed toward the shard we had spotted the previous day, a towering fragment of mirror-like crystal, suspended in midair above a slope of weathered stone. There was no wind here, no obvious magnetic field to hold it aloft, yet hung there, drifting in slow, deliberate arcs. From a distance, it shimmered with faint red highlights, reflecting the sky's crimson hue. Lieutenant Oren was first approached. "Still think it's just a mineral deposit?" he asked, glancing at me through his visor. "Not anymore," I said. My own voice sounded too loud in the stillness. As we drew closer, the reflections in the shard began to change. They showed us, but not quite us. My movements were a fraction of a second behind in the reflection. If I lifted my hand, my reflected self hesitated, then followed. It wasn't like a normal delay from light. It was too long, too deliberate. Commander Vance circled around to the other side. It's not reflecting surroundings accurately either. Look, the ridge behind me is gone. He was right. In the shard surface, the rocky backdrop had been replaced by a kind of shifting black void. We decided to test its reaction. Oren jumped lightly on the spot. His reflection in the shard stared straight ahead for 3 full seconds before finally mimicking the jump. And when it did, it turned its head toward me instead of facing forward. Dr. Suresh muttered something about nonlinear perception fields, her voice calm but tight. She pulled out the portable scanner and took readings. Energy outputs, odd. No emission spectrum I recognize. But there's motion within the shard's internal structure, like a slow ripple inside the material. We logged samples, or tried to. The shard resisted contact. The collection probe simply stopped half a meter from the surface, as if pressed against an invisible wall. When Oren moved his hand forward, his reflection smiled. Even though he didn't, we decided to mark the shard's location and continue. The city-like structures we had spotted from the ridge today before were now clearly visible, and our next goal was to survey them. We crossed a dry, cracked plain littered with smooth, black stones that rang faintly when stepped on, like hollow ceramic. The structures ahead grew taller with each step. They weren't ruins exactly, but they weren't pristine either. The geometry was alien. Elongated hexagonal spires, wide, sloping plazas, and archways cut from a single block of seamless stone. When we reached the outer edge, we found what looked like an entrance, a doorway 10 meters high, carved in a shape I can only describe as flowing geometry. It seemed to ripple slightly at the edges, though that may have been a heat haze. Inside, the air was cooler. The walls were smooth but patterned with faint grooves that glowed dimly when we passed our hands over them. The layout seemed simple at first. One main corridor, side passages branching off. But when we doubled back after a short survey, something was wrong. The entrance wasn't where we'd left it. "Map's wrong," Oren said, tapping at his wrist display. "Either I made a mistake, or this place doesn't stay put." We ran a quick test. Suresh marked the wall with a laser etcher, a bright blue X on the left panel. We walked for 3 minutes, turned around, and the mark was gone. The panel was a different shape entirely. It was as if the building had rearranged itself while we weren't looking. We split into 2 teams to cover more ground, something I'd normally never recommend in alien structures, but the commander wanted a full survey. My team kept to the central corridors, carefully noting each turn, while the others went deeper. We'd agreed on a rendezvous in 15 minutes. 10 minutes in, we found ourselves in a chamber we hadn't entered before. Even though the map suggested we'd walked a closed loop, it was circular, with a domed ceiling covered in silver-like ridges. In the center stood a pedestal, on which rested a perfect sphere made of the same black stone as the exterior walls. When I approached, the grooves in the ceiling brightened slightly. Not a reaction to light or sound. It felt more like awareness, though I kept that thought to myself. We took no samples here. The commander's voice came through comms. Regroup at the plaza. We got our data for now. When we exited, the building looked subtly different from the outside. An extra archway here, a missing terrace there, as if it had been redesigned in the short time we'd been inside. We logged the shard and the mutable architecture as Anomaly 02 and Anomaly 03. Back at the base, Dr. Suresh started cross-referencing both phenomena. Her theory, they were linked somehow, both responsive to our presence, both resisting conventional measurement. Tomorrow, we begin acoustic analysis of the constant whispering sound we've been hearing since arrival. The others seem to tune it out now, but for me, it had become impossible to ignore. I'm starting this log at 4:12 local time. Our local time is mostly meaningless here. Without a night cycle, we can only follow the ship's clock, but routine keeps us sane. We'd spent the past 3 days documenting the drifting echo shards, mapping their movement patterns, and confirming that they followed no natural wind or magnetic current we could detect. Last night, we moved further east from Base Camp Alpha, crossing a shallow canyon into what appears to be the remains of a long-abandoned settlement. At first glance, the city is a fossil civilization. Buildings stand in quiet rows, their walls made of a smooth black stone that's cold to the touch, but not brittle. No vines, no moss, no sign of decay, just an uncanny permanence, as though these structures refuse to age. The streets are paved with wide, flat slabs marked by faint lines and symbols. A few of them are the same geometric shapes we saw etched into the artificial moon. Doctorson thinks the city is thousands of years old. Lieutenant Marr thinks it might not be a city at all. Could be a manufacturing grid, he suggested over breakfast. Not everything with buildings is a city. But cities don't rearrange themselves. It happened first when Lieutenant Marr and I took a side street to survey a set of cylindrical towers. When we came back to the main street, no more than 5 minutes later, it was gone. Not blocked, not collapsed, just gone. In its place was a narrow passage that sloped downward and opened into a courtyard neither of us remembered. We thought we'd taken a wrong turn. Easy mistake in a foreign city. But Commander Rourke, monitoring our vitals and coordinates from Alpha, called over comms. You didn't take a wrong turn. Your GPS readings jumped. Street grids changed. Sun didn't believe it until she came herself, tracing our steps. This time, she marked a building with a small strip of thermal paint, bright orange against the stone, and then we turned away. When we looked back 30 seconds later, the building was gone. The paint strip was now on a completely different wall, 2 blocks down. The unsettling part isn't the movement itself. It's that it happened silently. No grinding, no shifting stone, no tremor underfoot. It's as if the architecture is rewriting itself in an instant, but only when you're not looking directly at it. We've begun calling it living architecture, though none of us have a working hypothesis for how it functions. Controlled observation, test 1. We decided to split into 2 groups. Marr and Sun set up visual observation from a roof. Commander Rourke, Sato, and I walked a known path through the grid, marking walls and intersections with a combination of thermal paint and reflective beacons. At random intervals, Marr would radio. Turn around now. Every time we did, something had changed. Sometimes just a doorway moved. Sometimes entire corridors shifted. Once, an alley we'd walked down only seconds earlier now led into a sealed wall. Our longest recorded change occurred when we left a marked square in the center of a plaza and walked into an adjacent building. Less than 2 minutes later, when we stepped back outside, the plaza was gone, replaced by what appeared to be a tiered garden of stone steps, all descending into a dry, black pool. By midday, we discovered something stranger. The city's rearrangement isn't random. It responds to movement patterns. If you walk a street and then retrace your steps exactly, it remains the same. But if you deviate, take a new turn, slow your pace, or stop to examine something, the grid seems to update. The changes are more dramatic when you move deeper toward the city's center. We've theorized two possibilities. The architecture is some kind of automated defense or adaptive camouflage. The architecture is designed to guide or mislead visitors, adjusting pathways toward specific destinations. Sun prefers the second theory. She's already mapping the changes, trying to see if they create an intentional pattern. Mar isn't convinced. If this is guiding us somewhere, he muttered, I'm not sure I want to see where. Incident at Sector Delta 4, around 1540. While documenting a row of triangular structures, Sato went inside one to take internal readings. The doorway he entered through simply wasn't there when we turned back to check on him. The wall was solid black stone. We kept calm. Alpha Protocol demands it. But I felt my pulse spike when his calm went silent for a full 40 seconds. When he reappeared, he stepped out of a completely different building across the street, looking confused but unharmed. His helmet cam footage shows that the interior had shifted while he was inside. Stairs leading upward became a sloping ramp. Windows moved from one wall to another. He said it felt like walking through a dream that forgot its own layout. Nightfall that never comes. If we can even call it nightfall. The perpetual crimson dusk here casts the city in the same bloody light at all hours. The artificial moon hangs motionless above, like an overseer's unblinking eye. Its patterns, still shifting, are visible in the glassy windows of the living structures. We've noticed that some of the buildings contain corridors that align directly with the moon's position, like sight lines in an observatory. Could the entire city be built in response to it? Closing notes, Day 6 on Xytherra. We'll continue to chart the living city tomorrow, focusing on whether the changes occur in the absence of all observers. Our drones will help answer that. For now, our map looks like a mess of crossed-out lines and shifting coordinates. If there's an original layout to this place, it's buried beneath hundreds, maybe thousands, of variations. Sun says it's like the city is playing a game with us. Mars says it's more like we're pieces in its game. Either way, Xytherra isn't done showing us what it can do. We had been on Xytherra for just over 2 weeks when we first became aware of it. Not through our instruments, but through our ears. It started in the quiet moments. When you were walking alone between modules at night, the constant low wind seemed to carry something, not quite words, more like the suggestion of speech, the rise and fall of a voice without the substance. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was calm static leaking through my earpiece, but my headset was off. Did you hear that? I asked Torres as we secured the solar array. He looked up from his toolkit, eyebrows furrowed. The wind? No. Something else. I struggled to describe it. Like someone mumbling, far away. Torres shrugged. Thought I was imagining it yesterday. Guess not. By the end of the day, 4 other crew members had reported the same thing. Day 17, initial readings. Dr. Hale decided to dedicate a survey session to the phenomenon. We set up 3 portable acoustic sensors in triangular perimeter outside the base, each calibrated to detect infrasound and ultra-high frequencies. At first, the readouts came back as a meaningless wave of overlapping frequencies. No clear patterns, just noise. But when Hale isolated a narrow band at 2.1 kHz, the lines smoothed into peaks and valleys, rhythmic, almost like syllables. We recorded it for 6 minutes before the pattern shifted completely, as if whatever was making the sound had changed the sentence. Could be seismic, said Kowalski, but there was no tremor data to back it up. Could be air currents in the canyons, suggested Hale, but the winds that day were low and steady. No turbulence. It didn't behave like natural wind. Day 18, closed listening. I tried something different. That night, when most of the crew was inside running simulations, I sat on the east observation platform with the sensors switched off and just listened. The whispering wasn't constant. It came in pulses like tides. When it swelled, I could almost convince myself I was hearing actual language, consonants brushing against vowels, unfinished words sliding away before I could catch them. It felt less like eavesdropping on a conversation, and more like someone murmuring directly into the world itself. At 0200, something stranger happened. The whisper stopped. Completely. The air went still, unnaturally still. My ears rang from the absence of sound. It lasted for maybe 20 seconds before the murmuring returned, softer than before. When I checked the environmental logs later, nothing unusual registered during that period. No wind speed drop, no atmospheric anomaly. But my body told a different story. Goosebumps up my arms, heartbeat too fast. Day 19, structural conduction test. Hale proposed an experiment. If the whisper was traveling through the air, we'd pick it up the same way everywhere. But if it was moving to the planet itself, we'd detect different patterns in different places. We placed one contact microphone directly against the ground in the canyon's shallow northern lip, another at the base's landing pad, and a third along the crystalline ridge near the floating shard field. The results were odd. The canyon microphone picked up the strongest, clearest version of the whisper, so much so that Hale had to reduce the gain to prevent clipping. The base microphone detected it faintly, almost as if it were muffled, but the ridge microphone captured something else entirely, a series of echoes that didn't match the timing of the other two feeds, as if the source was bouncing back from somewhere deep within the planet. Day 20, crew observation. By now, everyone on the team acknowledged the whisper was real, even if no one agreed on its origin. Reactions varied. Torres avoided the canyon altogether, claiming the sound made his teeth ache. Hale was fascinated, running spectrograms for hours, convinced that if she could capture enough samples, she'd find a repeating word or structure. Kowalski, ever the engineer, kept trying to link it to mechanical resonance, some deep planetary system we hadn't mapped yet. As for me, I couldn't stop thinking about the feeling I had on the observation platform that night. The silence, the 20 seconds where it chose not to speak. I didn't share that part with anyone. The whisper became part of life on Xytherra, a background presence we learned to live with. But in the back of my mind, I knew it was more than just an atmospheric quirk or geological artifact. It felt intentional. We had been studying the whispering phenomenon for nearly a week when the readings led us to the fissure. The canyon itself was a vast, gaping scar across Xytherra's crimson landscape, a jagged rift that ran for miles, its walls carved from the same black stone as the city. Our scans revealed something unexpected. Deep within the fissure, an enormous object was absorbing and refracting the whispering frequencies. Its size dwarfed any natural formation we'd encountered. The descent wasn't easy. The walls were steep, loose rocks scattered underfoot. Our exosuit's thrusters and magnetic grips kept us anchored as we moved downward in tight formation. Commander Vance led the way, helmet lights cutting through thick, unnatural shadows. After 30 minutes of careful navigation, the canyon floor opened into a colossal chamber, partially hidden by a natural overhang. There it was, the machine. The machine was unlike anything in our databases. A sphere, nearly 100 meters in diameter, composed of concentric rotating rings, interlocking gears, and orbiting mechanical segments. Its surface was a fusion of alien alloys and cybernetic plating, a blend of polished metal and glowing circuitry veins pulsing with soft blue light. At the center, a single, hyper-detailed mechanical, I rotated slowly. Its iris glowed crimson as scanning beams swept across the chamber. Steel tendrils, segmented, flexible, anchored the machine into the canyon walls, extending like the roots of a giant metallic tree. Dr. Aline's voice came over comms, awestruck. This isn't a machine, it's a system. A complex network of mechanical and computational elements. Lieutenant SAE reported her sensors detecting low levels of electromagnetic emissions, fluctuating rhythmically. The rotating eye swept over us, but there was no change in behavior. It did not react like a living predator or defensive sentinel. We set up a perimeter and began scanning. Chief Engineer Anvek ran diagnostics remotely, cautiously probing the structure's surface. Alien alloy, he confirmed. Composite metals unknown on Earth, resistant to our standard scanners. Dr. Katri mapped the energy flow, circuits branching out like veins, pulsing softly in an intricate rhythm. Specialist Hale worked to interface with external ports, hoping to read data logs or operational commands. The central I was mesmerizing. High-resolution, hyper-realistic detail. Layers of lenses and sensors within it made it look almost organic. Its slow rotation felt deliberate, systematic, not random. As the eye swept past me, I caught a glimpse of the reflections on its surface. Not just our own images, but faint patterns like data streams projected onto the metal iris. We gathered to discuss. Dr. Lean suggested it was some kind of planetary control system, a centralized processor regulating Xytherra's environment architecture, and perhaps even the whispering we'd heard. Lieutenant Renner speculated it could be a communication hub, relaying signals across the planet or beyond. Dr. Katri theorized it might be a power source, drawing energy from the planet itself. What was its purpose? Who built it? How long had it operated? Could it be alive? Could it be conscious? None of us had answers. But whatever it was, the machine formed the core of Xytherra's mystery, the heart of the canyon, the pulse beneath the red sky. We prepared to camp nearby, setting up equipment to monitor the machine's activity overnight. Tomorrow, we would begin a systematic study of its functions and its role in shaping the world around us. The canyon's oppressive silence wrapped around us as we settled into our final days on Xytherra. For nearly a month, we had lived in the shadow of the colossal spherical machine, observing its slow, relentless rotations and the intricate dance of its orbiting components. The mechanical eye's crimson glow pulsed rhythmically, as if marking time on a clock we couldn't read. The weight of our mission settled heavily on my shoulders. We had come to Xytherra as explorers and scientists, and we would leave carrying the burden of knowledge too vast to comprehend fully and yet incomplete. Every answer we uncovered birthed new questions. Every discovery only deepened the mystery. Our days were spent in tireless study, and our nights haunted by wonder. Dr. Marlene had become almost obsessive in her analyses. She carefully sampled the soils and the sparse air, correlating her data with the machine's rhythmic pulses. "This is beyond planetary control," she said one afternoon, staring at spectral readings displayed on her tablet. "The machine isn't just regulating the environment, it's interacting with it." Her voice held awe, tinged with disbelief. She pointed to patterns in the data, subtle fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, perfectly timed with shifts in atmospheric composition. The crimson dusk was no natural phenomenon, but the result of precise atmospheric conditioning, likely designed to maintain thermal stability and optimize energy use. The artificial moon overhead wasn't simply a satellite. It was a node in the system, possibly a control terminal or monitoring outpost. Its shifting geometric patterns resembled a complex encryption scheme, too advanced for us to decode, but unquestionably deliberate. I watched as Dr. Ishan Katri, hunched over his arrays, attempted to match the moon's changing patterns with the machine's pulses. The math was beautiful, almost musical, complex fractals echoing through time and space. The moon's signals could be transmitting data to the machine and back, he hypothesized. A feedback loop or a planetary consciousness distributed across multiple systems. Consciousness, I repeated quietly. The word tasted foreign here. Using mobile sensor platforms and remote drones, we expanded our perimeter each day, tracing the influence of the machine. The living architecture we had observed earlier seemed inseparable from the machine's energy field. The more we probed, the clearer it became that the city's shifting streets and buildings were manifestations of data flowing from the machine, an architectural symphony tuned to an invisible conductor. Chief Engineer Loris Anvek was fascinated. "This is the ultimate in adaptive infrastructure," he remarked one evening as we reviewed drone footage of streets rearranging themselves. "Buildings aren't static here. They're alive, reconfiguring to environmental demands or maybe even the presence of visitors." His voice carried a mixture of respect and envy. We were witnessing a pinnacle of engineering that our own species had barely begun to imagine. Our ongoing studies of the whispering sound, now accepted as a constant feature of Xytherra, led to a breakthrough on day 25. Specialist Rourke Hale developed a new frequency filter that isolated the sound's source much more precisely. "It's not just atmospheric," she explained, eyes shining with excitement. "The whisper is modulated by electromagnetic signals coming directly from the machine's core." Her data suggested the whisper was a form of low-bandwidth communication or environmental signaling, possibly diagnostic pulses, or a form of planetary status broadcast. The language was indecipherable, but its complexity suggested an intelligence behind it. We began referring to it as the planet's heartbeat, a subtle but pervasive presence connecting every part of the world. As the days waned, a somber routine took hold. We collected samples, logged data, and calibrated instruments with a meticulous care born of long experience. The artificial moon never shifted from its fixed position overhead, bathing us in that perpetual crimson glow. It had become a strange comfort, an unchanging sentinel marking the passage of our time here. Lieutenant Kimurate often took the first watch, scanning the horizon with her trained eyes, noting details others missed. One evening, as we gathered around a portable heater in the base camp's common area, she said quietly, "I don't think we'll ever really understand this place." Her words hung in the air. No one disagreed. The final preparations for departure consumed us. Erevos Gate's jump core needed recalibration after weeks of use. Supplies dwindled, and the physical toll living in the alien atmosphere was evident. Skin roughened, muscles ached, and minds carried the quiet strain of endless questions. We planned a last descent into the canyon, to retrieve additional sensor arrays, and take a final set of readings on the machine's core functions. Our route wound down steep cliffs and across narrow ledges. The air was thin and the silence deep. When we reached the machine's base for the last time, I felt a pang of melancholy. We deployed sensors to record mechanical vibrations, electromagnetic fluctuations, and energy outputs. Hale's updated filters captured the whispering sound with unprecedented clarity, and Catry spectrometers analyzed the moon's encrypted patterns alongside the machine's pulses. In the stillness, I stood before the rotating eye. It did not move faster or slower. It did not acknowledge us. It simply was. I wondered what it had seen in the millennia of its existence. How many civilizations had come and gone? What secrets did it hold? Our technology was rudimentary by its standards. We were children trying to read an ancient tome. On the return climb to the surface, the crew was silent. Mara broke the quiet, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're so small in the face of this." "I don't think small is the right word," I replied. "We're lucky to witness this, to learn from it." We gathered for a final debrief. Each of us shared our thoughts and theories, but all agreed on one thing. Xytherra was not a hostile world. It was a world designed, controlled, and maintained by an intelligence far beyond our comprehension, but not malevolent. It was a marvel, a monument, a mystery. Boarding Erevos Gate for the return jump, I glanced back at the crimson sky one last time. The artificial moon still hovered, a silent enigma against the dusk. As the jump core powered up, the familiar hum filled the ship. The stars bent and folded as space itself rippled around us. In that moment, I felt a profound connection, not just to my crew, but to the vast universe of wonders waiting beyond. We didn't have all the answers, but we had the experience. And sometimes that was enough. End of expedition log. Commander Elias Vance.